Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm Julie Kennan, the Director of Content at Charity Engine. I am thrilled to have everybody here today. I'll start with a big thank you to AFP. They provide this great platform where we can bring experts to help nonprofits grow, and that's sort of what we're in the business of doing. I'll give you a quick commercial. We offer nonprofits an all-in-one CRM that keeps your fundraising tools and data in one place. This gives you a crucial 360-degree view of your donors and helps you engage at a really personalized level. We are very invested in nonprofits and their success, and that is how we've connected with Isaac. Nadine just gave him an introduction. He helps connect nonprofits with tech. And I will also add that he is an avid pickleball player, which Nadine did not cover in her description. There will be a resource at the end that we'll put in the chat, or I think it's already under the video feed. There's a guide to selecting a nonprofit CRM that might be very helpful. People love it. And I will now turn it over to you, Isaac.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. And thank you, Nadine, for producing and to AFP and to Charity Engine. Really glad to be here with you today on behalf of Sage 70. Largely what we do is we help nonprofits make data and technology work, which is very different from making work out of data and technology. But stick with me and let's get some clarity about how to choose software. We've already done the intro, so I just want to add one last thing to it, which is that if you can see me, you can tell that this headshot is pretty old. So if you know anyone who does great headshots, please post in the chat. I'm in the Triangle region of North Carolina. If there's anybody out there who's got a great headshot photographer, it's time. Um, so choosing software is one of those things that we feel like we're trying to solve a problem. And we all know that usually the solution to the problem that we're trying to solve isn't really the software itself. It's not the tool. Nobody has a CRM-shaped hole in their heart. We're trying to solve the problems that we have every day in doing our jobs. We, as users of the software, for some greater purpose. In other words, the problem that we have is doing our job well. It's not any specific aspect of the software. The problem we have is how do we do our job well? And who's the our? The users, all the people who are going to interact with the system. And we're largely going to talk about CRM, but this applies for grant management systems and it applies for ERPs and whatever other central software platform that you might be selecting. Number one, and the best thing you can do is to start with your users. Get buy-in from them for changing systems. If you talk to folks about what's wrong with their job, if you ask them questions like, what's one magic wand that you might wave at one problem, or if you had three wishes, or all those kinds of questions that try and get to what's really burning for somebody, they're probably not going to tell you, I wish I had a new CRM. They're probably going to tell you about some specific problem or challenge that they have. And it's your job to frame that problem or challenge in the context of that CRM search, of that software search. This is the problem we're trying to solve. This software is going to help us solve it. So start with your users. And really, again, if you're in a CRM environment, we're talking about your advancement services people, your development operations people. Your major gift officers are never going to tell you they want a CRM. They're never going to be the ones who are so glad that you got a CRM. They might use some of the toys, they might use some of the bells and whistles. But start with your core users who spend most of their day looking at that screen. Include other stakeholders too, but keep that core audience in mind. They will remember that you did it, and a lot of the rise and fall of your implementation is going to be built on that. Now, when you're embarking on this process, hopefully that you is an us, because this is way too big a job, even if you're a very small org, and certainly if you're working at a university or at a large museum or something, you need a team because you need to get representation from across all the different levels and functional areas that are affected. So you've got your fundraising folks, you've got your advancement services folks, you've got your accounting folks. They're definitely going to be impacted by this. You have a board liaison role. You probably want to talk to them because reporting is going to be impacted. And so if you've got business intelligence unit, you're going to want to talk to them. All of the people whose jobs are impacted by this software need to have representation of some kind on the team. Now, it may not be practical to build a team of 20, but you want to identify, even for folks who maybe you're not choosing a liaison from their department, assign someone within your team to be the liaison to that department that doesn't have representation. Make sure that they're not ignored or forgotten. At most organizations, it's the same department that gets forgotten over and over and over again. So, be aware of that and make sure to reach out and make sure to connect. Um, Keep in mind, though, that when you're building this team, the decision-making role has to be well defined. So whether you're using a MoCA model or a DARE model or whatever your role clarity model is, make sure that it's very clear what the team does, what they're responsible for, who gets to make decisions, who gets to advise on decisions, who's there to execute, who's there to provide information, and have that be clear across the whole team. That initial roles alignment piece, especially the larger you are, is really, really, really important. Um, the other thing is, again, if you're a more complex organization, try and find a neutral kind of staff member. So not necessarily someone whose day-to-day is directly impacted by the CRM, but somebody with a reputation for fairness, somebody with a reputation for clear-headed thinking, who you can include, and who's really looking out for the good of the organization as a whole, because you'll have no shortage of advocates for every given department and every given role. And finding somebody who's really trying to think about the whole org can be super, super helpful. Um, as always, you want a clear team leader and you want an executive sponsor, and those two are not the same thing. Your executive sponsor is there to block and tackle and to make sure that the importance of this project and its relevance is being communicated throughout the organization. Your team leader is organizing the work. Your team leader is getting things done. Um, Before we move on, I do want to ask you all if you have questions, don't be shy. Please put them into the question area. Nadine will bring them to my attention, and um, I'll try and address the ones that kind of fit into the topic as we go. But I promise I will address the rest of them at the end of the show. So please send them my way. I'm looking forward to them. So, when you're choosing a new system, it may seem obvious that you need to know why. Why are you looking for a new system? But you really want to be able to get that into a few different boxes. So, number one, you want to talk about what will improve, what's going to be better than before. Now, the reality is that not everything will be. You're not going to solve every problem, you're not going to fix every bit of discontent you may have with the old system. But you really do want to identify what you need to be better than before. Um, and when you ask people, they tend to have a hard time articulating the future, right? If you ask people what's wrong, you'll sit in a meeting all day and you'll hear all about what's wrong. But if you ask people, what do you want from the future? It's a very hard question to answer. It's very hard to visualize and to think about what you want better. So this is a good way to broach that and to start making it real, is to move from, okay, tell me what's the most problematic thing. Now tell me how you want it to be better. So a lot of times you'll, by the way, find that people talk about user interface. They may not use the terms UI and UX, but that's where a lot of this will lie. They'll talk about, oh, it's a lot of clicks, or I can't get everything on one screen. Um, do your best to screenshot those things. Do your best to get video capture of those things, because even though you think they're UI problems, they're very often solved a different way. They're not always solved the way we think or the way we describe the problem. So try and capture it visually, and that'll be really, really helpful for you. Um, Moving from those particulars, those smalls, to the big, what does success look like? You want to start asking yourself, okay, we're a year into the new system. What what made it better? What improved? Um, it feels like a similar question to the one before, but when you're asking what does success look like, you're asking for a bigger picture. You're not asking for which operation is easier. You're asking for how did we advance our mission or our strategy better? How did we maybe become more efficient as a department? How did we improve our stewardship of our donors? What does success look like is trying to ask some of those bigger questions. And these are going to serve as kind of a lighthouse for when you have to make difficult decisions in the process to be able to pull back and remind ourselves, what did we want to be better than before, and what does success look like for us in the long term? Setting these in advance is super important. And, one of the tools that I also really, really love is a pre-mortem, where you sort of ask yourself, wow, if this just went really, really, really poorly, why? Why did it happen that way? And do a little bit of role playing, a little bit of imagining. And that's a really great way of surfacing the challenges, the obstacles that you're likely to face. Um, it's really useful to hire an assessment expert to take you through this process. I'll probably say that a couple more times. I won't lie, I'm a little biased, but that's the work that we do, and we really help organizations because we've done it dozens of times, and many times you'll have done it zero or one times. So we really want to bring some of that expertise and experience to you. If you've set your table rather, and you've figured out what you hope will be better, you've named some of your problematic processes, you've built your teams, you've figured out who's coming along on this journey, who's leading. The next practical step is the needs assessment. And if you hire an expert, they'll have a very structured process for this. But what you want to do, whether you're working with an expert or you're going it alone, is first draw a big circle around all this. So, what can you afford? What does your budget really look like? You're going to eliminate lots and lots and lots of options based on your budgetary considerations, and keeping in mind that not just on the top end, but on the bottom end too. So, if you're a large and complex institution, setting a budget's a good way of also recognizing there's a lot of less mature tools or tools intended for a down market audience that probably aren't a fit for you either. I can tell you that we keep track of over 50 systems, just CRM systems. So there's a lot out there, and anything you can do to whittle that down is going to really help. But you also want to think about your own institution and culture and style. So, are you risk averse or are you early adopters? Um, is your board really into things like the latest hit tools, but your staff maybe needs a lot of training before you can get there? Identify some of those issues early on because, like with everything, when you don't have good alignment, it's really hard to make progress. We've had those clients whose board members are all gung-ho about building this great Salesforce implementation, and it's going to be terrific, and it's going to be complicated, and it's going to do all the things we want it to do. And their staff is used to working in Excel spreadsheets and is maybe not ready to make that leap. So figuring out where you lie on that spectrum, and whether you're open to customizing your software or adapting your processes, right? Are you willing to change how you do the work, or does the software need to change to suit you? And do you have the budget to afford that, right? If you're willing to adopt new practices and new processes, that'll cost you maybe more in time, but certainly a lot less in dollars than customizing your software. Uh, you also want to start doing the very basic understanding of your own environment. So, are there any limitations around hardware and software? Even in 2025, we have a client who will only use on-premises systems. They're a very privacy and security minded client, and so there's a whole lot of systems that are just not going to be something they can use. But you might be a Microsoft shop. You might want to prefer systems that have strong integrations with Microsoft. Maybe you've got some particular ERP that you want to integrate with, and so you want to prefer systems that either have existing integrations or have vendors with expertise in creating those. All of these things are going to help bring to life the various issues that you need to consider, and also reconnect you back to those team members you've assembled, because each of them is going to be coming from a different perspective on what that environment is, what those limitations are, what the security needs are, what the integrations are. Um, and that's going to help you also surface the staff roles that you need. Do you have all the right roles for adopting a system, and what might it look like if you chose one system versus another? Is there a database administrator? What skills do they need? Is it Power BI? Is it SSRS? Is it SQL? What are we talking about that is going to be needed to staff this? Very, very important to think about because, to be honest, your overall budget is going to be driven by your staffing and skills, probably more so in the long run than the actual costs of your system. When you do the needs assessment, as you move from big picture, you're going to again get down to details. So surfacing all the requirements. And again, this is hard. I strongly recommend these days, it's pretty easy to identify previous organizations that have done this work and their list of requirements. It's relatively easy to surface feature lists from the different CRM products that are out there and reverse engineer them into requirements. And the nice thing about doing that is that you don't have to think of everything all over again. Other folks have done this, and you'll benefit from their experience. But one thing that I really want to encourage you to do is to use some kind of scoring or rating system, because when we say requirements, and we start doing that collection process, we often get lots and lots and lots of nice to haves, lots and lots and lots of not really required, but. And sometimes our users don't really understand the distinction between a requirement and a nice to have. So some things you can do is create like a rating scale. The problem with the rating scale is you'll get some folks who return all of their requirements as tens. So you might need to limit how many tens you can assign. Um, you can do this is a really effective technique as you're later in that process and you've already kind of got a big pool of requirements and now you're trying to prioritize. You can assign to department heads, for example. Pick three that are absolutely necessary that you absolutely can't miss. No more than three, something like that, to help scale this out, to help really force people to do the hard work of prioritizing, of saying, I could live without that. I can't live without this. You've done your needs assessment, you've got your team, you've got a budget, you've got a sense of purpose, and now you need to find vendors. Because the next step in this process is to bring your needs, to bring those requirements to vendors, and to do that dance and to do that dating and to do that matching of what can the different vendors provide? How does that match against your requirements? How does that match against your needs? But it's not just a simple matching algorithm. It's not just, oh, this vendor put a check mark next to each of our requirements, because your vendor's really your partner. And this is, I think, something that we've learned in the almost 15 years that we've been doing this. There are great technology products that do not have necessarily a vendor standing behind them. And this is especially true when you're doing a kind of a build your own inside of a Dynamics or a Salesforce environment where your specific implementation is a unique product and there's not really a vendor who stands behind that and it's on you. And we've done this work with vendors like Charity Engine who are partners with our clients, not just from implementation, but really throughout. That's who you turn to when you want to extend your use of the system. That's who you turn to when you want to think about how to leverage it better. So it's a relationship and it's an important one. So ask around. Ask other organizations not just about how they like the product, but how they like the vendor, how they like their training, how they like their customer support, how they like their ongoing keep in touch. Um, Go to the trade shows, visit the booths, take the demos. There's a lot of online demos these days. This is actually one of the things that has made our job so much easier, and I am very grateful to all the vendors who do this well. But online demos and vendor videos, especially the ones that evaluate specific processes, they show you, for example, here's how you do batch gift entry. or here's how you set up a pipeline for a major gift. Those demos really help us understand how a system looks and feels and gets used, and they're more increasingly available online. Take the time, watch them, assign them to people on your team, assign them to people to come back and report back on, um, and use other resources that are available. AASP, N10, AFP, everyone's got some resources available online to help you through this process. We do a lot of sharing in this industry, so do take advantage of it. Um, and that's really going to bring you to the question now of you've met a bunch of folks, you're wanting to take those next steps. Are you going to build an RFP or are you going to do something a little bit different? These are basically different selection modalities. So, RFX is the buzzword that you'll hear now in procurement. But basically, it's, RFPs, requests for proposal, versus these others, requests for information or requests for qualification. All of these are really, I think, in two categories. RFPs are that long list of specifications in which you say, here's all the things that we need. Can your software do all this? And then validate for us some other elements, like that you work a certain way, that you have a certain amount of experience, that you have certain certifications, that you're registered with our state, whatever it might be, whatever compliance requirements you might have. And RFPs are very, very good for that kind of process. And in larger and larger organizations, they're super important, and especially because they also are a way to promote fairness and to limit bias. All the vendors get all the same information. It's the same proposal. And so that's a helpful way to kind of level the playing field. But they can be a little rigid. They can rule out good options, and they can even discourage some proposals because sometimes um, what happens in an RFP is that you're forced to self-diagnose. You're forced to understand not only your problems, but what solutions might exist. And this is a big problem because, when you go to the doctor and you say, my elbow hurts, you expect the doctor to figure out why your elbow hurts. You don't expect to come to the doctor and tell the doctor, I have tennis elbow, right? That's for the doctor to figure out. Maybe you don't have tennis elbow, right? Maybe there's some other cause for your elbow injury. Maybe it's not tennis elbow. Maybe it's golf elbow. Um, you don't want to treat these two different injuries the same way. But RFPs do kind of require us to diagnose not only what's wrong, but also to provide that prescription, to provide the remedy. And some vendors and some organizations will simply look at that RFP and say, oh, I don't think this is for us, even when it could very well be, because maybe you've diagnosed it in a way that they might not have. On the flip side, you have uh, this less formal RFI type process where you're really inviting the vendors to learn more about you as you ask them to share more about them. So it's really about dialogue. So it's a much, much, much easier document to put together. An RFP could be a 40, 50, 70-page document. An RFI is probably a 5 or 6 page document, where you're asking them to share about the kinds of projects that they've done. You're asking them to talk about their capabilities. You're asking them to describe their process and approach. You're not asking them to give you a price quote on a kind of a very rigid procurement. Um, which one's right for you will depend. It will depend on your own capabilities internally. It's going to depend on um, your compliance needs and the style with which your organization does this kind of thing. Uh, but I will say that they're also not necessarily independent. You can start from an RFI, identify a smaller number of vendors who you think could be a good fit, and begin that exploration process with them, and then follow with a limited RFP that you only issue to those vendors you want to work with, who already are familiar with you to some extent. And that can be an effective process if you really have to do an RFP, but don't want to miss out on the advantages of inviting vendors in earlier so that they can help solution with you. Um, I will suggest that when you do start working with vendors, you set up an email address that is like an email list for all of this. So, RFP at yourorganization.org, or whatever it might be, because you will get added to the vendor's marketing list and you will get probably more emails than you are hoping to, especially if you reach out broad. And like I said, we track over 50 products. So you can imagine it could get to be a lot. It will help you filter email if you use a separate email address. That said, we actually really like to see what the vendors send, like in marketing emails, at least a few of them, because it gives us a sense of what it's going to be like to be a client. It tells us a little bit about how the vendor presents themselves to the world. And I'll add one last thing. If you have a chance to go to a vendor conference, and maybe you won't be able to do this with everybody, but certainly when you're onto your finalists and you're really starting to think very seriously about one or two or three orgs, and you're able to attend a conference, to attend their user conference, that can be a super helpful way to meet lots of folks who are really, really, really using the product, and just get a much better sense of, do you fit? Are you like the other clients of the vendor? Do you make sense with their existing clientele? So that may be out of reach, but if you can do it, recommend it. When you do get down to these deeper conversations, whether that's through a demo process, which we'll talk about in just a minute, or even in the RFI process, and you're just starting to have that conversation, um, it's super important that you ask hard and specific questions. Thing is that there are so many use cases that are similar. And as a vendor, you see a lot of clients, and it can be hard to answer a question definitively unless it's really specific. Because everyone's processes are very similar, but not identical. And well, be honest, users aren't always great at articulating exactly their problems. So part of your job as that selection team, as the team leading the CRM project, is to try and turn those user concerns into really specific questions. So, I've got here, can you accept euros? That's a good specific question. As a vendor, I can clearly answer yes, no, yes, but only through two of our payment gateways and not the third, right? I can really tell you that sort of thing. And I strongly encourage you, don't assume anything about how the product works. There are a lot of tools out there, and not all of them work the way we would assume they do. Um, this issue of like our data entry screens customizable, um, I remember, about 10 years ago when a lot of folks were moving from on-prem systems into the cloud, everyone just assumed that data entry screens would be customizable. It was a very common feature in on-prem systems, and it's frankly less common in web-based systems. Um, and people didn't even think to ask the question. So try and be really specific. Try and name those hard questions. And if you take anything away from today and this conversation about how to really match and map, I want you to take this away. If you ask a software developer, if you ask an engineer, can we do X? The answer is yes. You're not asking the better question, which is, how much would it cost if we wanted to do X? Because software engineers think in a concrete way about whether something is possible. And what you want to know is whether something is practical. So you've really got to be careful and make sure that you're asking that. Similarly, when you want to ask, can I do this in the system? A lot of times the answer is yes, but then if you actually look at how to do it in the system, the answer is no, right? Something that you can do in 16 clicks, and also if you export and then re-import a file, it's not really what I meant by can you do it in the system, right? So usability, how easy it is to perform the function, is very hard to learn from the RFP process. And so that's why you really want folks to prove it. Set up demos. We recommend narrowing this down to no more than 4 vendors. I prefer 3. Frankly, I prefer 2. Um, we want to get down to vendors. And what you want to do is pick the best in class for a particular approach. So if we're looking at a customizable platform approach, we're not going to bring in both Salesforce and Dynamics. We're going to choose what we think is the best fit for the client within that space, right? And then if we want to pick, okay, what do we think is the best web-based version for more complex organizations? We're not going to bring in seven different groups. We're going to bring in one of them, maybe Charity Engine. Um, so think that through so that your choices of who you're demoing with you don't really want apples to apples. What you want is vendors who present different strategic approaches to solving your needs. And then you can really understand and have better clarity. You can always decide, right, that, hey, we really like this approach. We think this is the right approach, but the vendor who demoed for us, we have some question marks on. Let's bring in their backup, right? Let's bring in the folks we didn't invite on that first round just to have a point of comparison. But if you miss out on a whole different solution model, then you just missed out, and it may have been the better choice for you. Um, I would also encourage you to demand in-depth demos, even if you're a small organization, especially now with so many of these demos being recorded. You can get a lot of value if you are willing to do the prep work of having watched some of those overview demos to say, hey, give us a few hours, but we're going to ask the in-depth questions, the ones that are going to prove that you're a good match for us. So script that demo, pick the processes and features that you want to see, give them to the vendor, let the vendor build out that demo, and this is also a great opportunity to invite people beyond the selection team, to have more people have a look, watch. They don't have to come for the whole thing. Tell folks on the accounting team, hey, we're going to cover the link to the ERP in, this half hour. Come visit. But really make it a moment within your organization. That week that you're doing demos, that 2 weeks that you're doing demos, it should be part of the buzz in the hallways, on your Microsoft Teams, wherever it is. Everyone should know about it. Everyone should have some encounter with it. Um, and when you're doing this work, this is again an opportunity to reconnect with your users and write test cases with them collaboratively. You really want to look for test cases that are um, that can be shown in a demo. Some of them are going to be cumbersome to do in a demo. You won't really be able to. Some of them will require the the vendor team to um, either dummy up data or they might request data from you. The larger an institution you are, the more likely you are to find willingness from the vendor to do this. And you should, and the vendor should, because it's going to really prove how do I do basic things like, okay, can you divorce this couple? After you divorce the couple, can you show me where the transactions went? Where are the hard credits? Where are the soft credits? What about the attributes? What about the giving circles? What about their giving levels? Right? You can really see how all that's going to work in real life cases and real life scenarios. So engage your users again for those. Um, and once you've done all that, check references. Like really check references. I know it's hard to find a bad reference, but what we've really found over the years, especially when it comes to kind of CRM systems, is that references have been incredibly valuable in telling us really honest um, issues and like very, very positive feedback will include here are the places where we struggled, or if we had to do it all again, I would have done this up front during the onboarding. It's so valuable, and frankly, I don't think we do it often enough. So I strongly encourage you, and if you can visit other client sites, that's fantastic. You will not learn better than by sitting with folks in their office, watching them use the system, how a system really, really works. Highly recommended. Now you're going to do a comparison, right? So you've got everybody out there, you've demoed, you've narrowed yourself down, and now you're weighing things like total cost of ownership. Um, think about how this affects your other systems. Do you need to upgrade anything? We've actually seen this a lot with like back end upgrades being necessary in your Azure environment or things like that. So make sure your IT team is brought in here and identifies what's necessary. Upgrades to your virtual machine. There are hidden traps here that can be costly or that can be sort of the opportunity to take care of something that you should have taken care of maybe a while ago, but there wasn't a burning need. So bring IT in over here, make sure that you get that covered. Um, and we mentioned this earlier, matching up your staffing. Do you need to hire different people for this? Do you need to get special skills? Do people need to go through a certification process? Getting certified in whatever system you choose is a really, really, really great idea. And in many cases, you can do it in advance of adopting the product. So that is a worthwhile way to spend some time. And then don't forget, your implementation costs versus your ongoing costs. Look for the nonprofit discounts for systems that have it. Think about contract length. I try and tell my clients not to be scared of longish contract lengths. Um, if you've done this work right, you will not want to leave your system soon anyway. And if you come in with short contract lengths, what you're doing is you're creating um, a disincentive for your organization to really buy in. So as much as, it can feel a little scary, I do recommend thinking about those longer contract lengths. Um, and lastly, after you decide, document why you decided. What were the key, you're going to have that last conversation and you're going to have those couple of key issues that tip the balance in favor of one or the other. Document that. Maybe you're just recording the meeting and using that AI summary afterwards to do that documentation. That's terrific. Um, do a post-mortem. How did the selection process proceed? Did it go well? Did it not go well? Who was involved? Who should have been involved? Um, and lastly, don't forget to express gratitude and throw a party. This is a big, complex process, and you're going to live with the consequences of it for some time. So take that moment, congratulate yourselves, recognize that you've laid the foundation for your organization's success for years to come. That's my message for you today. It's your turn to ask questions. I will be here for at least the next 20 minutes or so, and so I'll take anything from the floor.
I will just remind the audience that you can click on the Q&A tab next to the video viewer and click your mouse into the box, type your question, and hit send. We don't have any as of yet.
I suppose that means I've been exceptionally clear. I do want to take the opportunity once again to thank AFP for hosting these webinars and for all the work that they do. Also want to again express my appreciation to Charity Engine. We've worked with several clients together over the years, and really, really glad to have you as a partner. Uh, so quick questions got loaded up here. So long term, but is it worth pressing on terms in contracts with vendors, thinking of repercussions if you break contracts? Um, so uh, is it worth pressing on terms? Let me frame it differently. You should always negotiate. You should negotiate with all your vendors because you can likely get a better deal than the first offer. But more than just a better deal, more than just saving a few dollars, negotiation is a way of helping both sides understand what's important to one another. So it may be that what's important to the vendor right now is they're trying to, and you'll find this with salespeople, they need to hit some quota this month, and so they're trying to get you in fast, 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 and they may have incentives for you. And your interest may be different. Your interest may be to take a longer period of time, but you can balance that out by saying, I'm not ready to sign this month, but I am looking for a 4-year contract, not a 3-year contract, right? Yeah, I will say that in terms of, repercussions for breaking contracts, talk to legal about what is reasonable, but you should not be over a barrel in terms of ownership of your data. You should not be in a barrel over the ability to leave. And one thing that I think you ought to have in mind when you're doing these negotiations is be very clear about the notice date. Be very clear about the notice date, like when do you have to notify if you're going to leave, and if you can, negotiate for a renewal option. So if you can negotiate for an option that says, yeah, I'll give you 6 months notice before we leave, or I'll give you 12 months notice before we leave, but you have to guarantee us a 12-month extension on our contract once we've made that notification, that can really make it easier for everybody to have the expansiveness that you need to do your conversion work on a reasonable basis. Um, okay, some more questions here. Oh, and thank you for the recommendation on the headshot. Appreciate it. Okay, we are an affiliate of a larger system who has a CRM they're eventually going to get on, but I'm looking for something smaller and shorter term as we have one large event a year. So yeah, there are definitely systems you can use for that sort of thing. GiveSmart's one that's come up a few times for us recently as a system you can kind of plug into quickly. I'll say in general that like event management is not necessarily a strong tool of traditional CRMs very often. So if you're really looking for this kind of plugin because I need to run a gala, I would encourage you to look at the fundraising platforms and the peer-to-peer kind of single-use folks to plug in. And you may find that you like them and want to adopt them and integrate them into your CRM as well once you make that selection. But I don't believe in sort of disposable CRM. I think the fundraising platform tools are going to be where you'll find that answer. Um, all right, another question. I found different reviews online of the software. Any particular source you would recommend? So I don't think that online reviews are very valuable in this space. And believe me, we pore over them and try and extract whatever value we can. But we really struggle to find enough specificity in those reviews to really tell us whether a product's going to be a fit for any particular client. It's also really hard to know, like you might see the dates on the review, but it's hard to map the dates to a particular feature set or interface. So somebody giving you a review from 2021 of what Eventbrite looked like, it's not helpful in choosing Eventbrite in 2025. So yeah, I think you're much better off reaching out to your networks for reviews than you are looking at, G2 or whatever. Um, Expected time for the process that finding the right CRM or tech should take. Yeah, so I'll say, our enterprise clients tend to take, I think one of my colleagues said the rule is it's going to take 2 years, it's going to cost $2 million, and nobody's going to be too happy about it. That's probably right for larger orgs, even into 36 months if you're talking about kind of soup to nuts selection through implementation. Smaller orgs, I would say, um, if you're in that sort of up to 5, 6, $7 million a year revenue, give yourself 9 months. Um, and if you're in between those two, then you're in between those two, right? So definitely 18 months is a pretty good number to peg for doing your process and then doing your migration for a mid-size org. That's pretty reasonable. Um, let's see. Uh, the presentation slides are available to you in the reference tab. Nadine, can you confirm where they are?
That is on the Resources tab, which is right below the video player on the event page.
The resources tab. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Uh, okay. Some other questions here. What are some common red flags to watch out for in the selection process? So if you're talking about sort of red flags from a vendor perspective, I would say uh, vendors who don't let you talk to the tech people are a red flag, right? Like, yes, there's a salesperson who's managing this process, but you should be able to talk to actual engineers as part of this. And if, they're going to defend their time to a certain extent, but if they're really walling you off, that's a pretty big red flag. Vendors who struggle to give you references, and I know that sounds surprising, but it's out there. Vendors who struggle to give you references is another one. Um, and I think this might be from the same person. Can you talk about the process of uh, transfer of data when switching or upgrading? So, I mean, can I talk about it? I can talk about it for days and days. Migration is, an important and fraught part of this. You need to do a good job of migration in order to um, be in a positive place after you transfer. And that's where a good bulk of the time that it takes to do this lives. The mistake I think that a lot of organizations make is that they come into the process saying, okay, well, when we move CRMs, that'll be the right time to fix all of our data problems because we'll have to. And while that's true, an even better time to start fixing all your data problems is before. Not only because you reap the benefits of it, right? When you fix your data, when you fix your data hygiene, when you deal with your duplicates, when you make decisions you've been putting off about how to organize your data, you immediately reap the benefits of having better data. But a lot of organizations will end up with this double whammy of a project of both choosing a new CRM and also addressing sometimes decades of data sins. And it's just really hard to do. And you're probably gonna do a less good job on both of those projects because you don't have enough time. So don't necessarily think that they are all the same project. We've been using the term digital transformation to try and capture this larger picture of not just switching to a new system, but really thinking about those other pieces, including data hygiene and data governance, integrations, security, privacy, etc. That might be a useful framework. Um, are there any software providers that void contracts if software doesn't live up to expectations or promises? Um, so I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never had a case that I can think of in which a vendor returned dollars to a client in any substantial way. Vendors will um, provide additional services. They'll extend timelines. They'll offer some, professional service hours. So it's not to say that vendors are not trying to accept responsibility when they make mistakes or when issues arise. They are, and they are partners, and I think often they go above and beyond. But you should not enter this with the mindset of, well, somebody will give me a money back guarantee if I don't like it. It's not going to work that way. Um, do you have any guidance on what to do if you've selected a vendor but things aren't going well? What steps can you take to try and resolve the issues, and how can you gracefully transition to a different vendor? Well, yes. So first off, the way to build a good relationship with a vendor is to start before there are problems. So, um, sharing what you have built in terms of those early things that we talked about. How will things be better in our new system? What does success look like? Some of the process that you went through and the specifications that you developed, share this stuff with the vendor so that the vendor has a better in context understanding of what success looks like for your project. Because the reality is that there are a million decisions that you make and that they make, and you can't all check them off against each other. So you need to have something that aligns you. You need to have that lighthouse that everyone can look to. So, number one is do a really good job of sharing your context with your vendor. Have regular meetings, have regular checkpoints. You may find it useful to have more than one relationship point of contact, right? So you may have a technical lead, you may have a client lead. Um, Take those meetings seriously. Oh, here's another thing that could be a red flag, but which I strongly recommend is agree with the vendor on the project management software that you're going to use to track this, whether it's yours or theirs. Participate in that system. And if a vendor doesn't have a project management system that you can get transparency into, that's a red flag. They should be very open about exactly what tasks are being assigned and what work's being done. And they really shouldn't have issues sharing that with you, at a reasonable level of granularity. Um, to resolve issues, you need to communicate. The issues don't get resolved any other way, right? So communicate, communicate, communicate. And when it's time to gracefully transition, if you really think a project isn't going to work out, I would recommend two things. One, bring in an external expert, maybe someone who's worked with this vendor before, to try and mediate this, to try and repair this, because nothing is going to be less expensive than fixing your problem. Trying to like start again, rip the band-aid, restart, it's it's not a great solution. And I have to say that, in a lot of projects, there'll be that moment where people say, maybe we should just, and you got to take that word just out of it and say to yourself, wait, maybe we should start this entire project over again with another vendor? Really? So try to mediate your way out of it. The vendor is also going to be pretty incentivized to do so. So unless trust is really, irreparable, my recommendation is believe in the good work that you did in picking the vendor and find your way through that forest. Um, Okay, last question. What's one overlooked internal workflow or process nonprofits should always map before looking at vendors? That's a really good question. Um, so I would say the processes that you're very likely to have been mapping already are things like your gift entry process, your reconciliation process, your every payment channel, and how you get that done. So, your how do we get PayPal and how do we get all the different credit cards through? Everyone's thinking through those processes. What you might not be thinking through is, and this may not apply to all of you, but your bio process, your intake process for new constituents, because very often those are coming from lots of different places. You're hosting an event, you are importing this from here or from there. Maybe you're an organization that provides services, and so your summer camp every year is where you get a whole bunch of new constituents. Those processes where in a relatively time constrained period you have to bring a bunch of people into the system and do a bunch of data hygiene, um, that's a process that is worth thinking through and mapping out, because that's where there's a lot of interface with your new CRM. So I'll go with that as my final answer. Thank you everybody for all the questions. Thank you everybody for spending time with us, whether you're here today or watching this on a recording later. And once again, thank you to our sponsor Charity Engine and to AFP. And with that, I will hand it back to our presenter. Thank you, everybody.
On behalf of AFP Global, I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar live stream. Please take a brief moment to complete our survey, which helps us program future events. Please join us for our next webinar, Get Queued Up, Grow Your Fundraising Program by Including LGBTQIA+ Supporters, tomorrow, July 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern. This concludes today's stream. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.